Today, we're diving deep into the mind of one of literature's most famous anti-heroes, Raskolnikov, and we're going to unpack the terrifying philosophy that drove him to pick up that axe.
Okay, so to really get this novel, you kind of have to understand the author himself. Before he ever wrote a word of Crime and Punishment, a young Fyodor Dostoevsky was sentenced to death. Imagine this. He was tied to a stake, waiting for the firing squad, and only at the very last second was his sentence changed. That moment, staring death right in the face, would shape pretty much everything he ever wrote. That real-life trauma, knowing what it feels like to be condemned, became the absolute foundation for this masterpiece. See, for him, a crime isn't just about breaking the law. It's this huge, psychological, even spiritual event. It's a story about a man who builds a prison in his own mind long before he ever actually commits a crime.
So, how does this all play out? Well, let's meet our guy, Rodion Raskolnikov. He's this brilliant but really poor ex-student living in a closet-sized attic in St. Petersburg, and he's been cooking up this dangerous, seductive new theory.
He comes up with this idea that humanity is basically split right down the middle into two totally separate categories. And on one side, you've got, well, most of us.
And just look at how stark this division is. The ordinary people, they're just material, cogs in the machine. They have to obey the law. But then you have the extraordinary ones, the Napoleons, the world changers. They get to operate on a completely different level. In his mind, they have a right, almost a duty, to step over any obstacle, even if that obstacle is another human being.
And here's the kicker. He convinces himself that he is one of these extraordinary men. So he starts to rationalize that killing an old, nasty pawnbroker isn't really a crime. No, it's a test. It's a philosophical experiment to prove his own greatness and, use her money for some higher purpose. He actually believes his superior intellect will let him stay completely detached and in control.
And this is the moment where that clean, abstract theory just smashes head-on into brutal, messy reality.
So as Raskolnikov is making his way up to the pawnbroker's apartment, you can just feel all those careful plans and intellectual justifications starting to crack and crumble. This little philosophical exercise is suddenly getting very, very real. He is no longer the cold, detached Superman from his theory, not even close. Every little creak of the floorboards, every second of silence, just ratchets up the panic inside him. All that certainty is gone, replaced by just raw physical fear. He can literally feel his heart hammering against his ribs. He's wondering, am I too pale? Can people see how terrified I am? This isn't the calm resolve of a Napoleon. This is the pure terror of a man about to fall apart. He makes one last adjustment to the axe he's got hidden in a sling under his coat. It's a chilling final check. And then the door opens, and he acts. The murder is absolutely nothing like he pictured it. It's clumsy, it's horrific, it's total chaos. And right in the middle of it all, the pawnbroker's gentle, innocent sister, Lizaveta, just happens to walk in. He panics, and he kills her, too. Just like that, his grand philosophical experiment is now just a squalid, brutal double murder. He actually manages to get away without being caught. But Raskolnikov finds out really fast that the true punishment for what he did isn't going to happen in some prison cell. Nope, it has already started, right inside his own head. So instead of feeling that power, that freedom of the extraordinary man, he's immediately plunged into this fever of guilt and paranoia. He feels totally and completely cut off from the rest of humanity. It's like his own body and mind are turning on him. He's got these feverish chills, his thoughts are all jumbled, and he's obsessed with every tiny detail, convinced he left a clue behind. His mind is his new prison, and the chief warden is this incredibly sharp detective named Porfiri Petrovich. And this quote, it perfectly captures Porfiry's genius. He doesn't need fingerprints or witnesses. He just engages Raskolnikov in this brilliant psychological cat-and-mouse game. He knows Raskolnikov's guilt is like a force of nature, and it's going to pull him closer and closer to the flame until he has to confess. So as Raskolnikov is just completely unraveling, sick and alienated from everyone, he finds himself drawn to just one person, Sonia Marmeladov.
She's a young woman who's been forced into prostitution to feed her family, and she represents a path he just can't understand, a path of faith, of humility, and of suffering to find redemption. What happens next is, honestly, one of the most powerful scenes in all of literature. Raskolnikov, the murderer who believes in absolutely nothing, goes to Sonia, the sinner who believes in everything, and he makes this bizarre request. He wants her to read him the Bible story about a man being raised from the dead.
You know, he calls himself a lunatic, but she sees something else. You can just feel her hands shaking as she finds the passage. She can barely get the words out. She knows he doesn't believe, but he insists.
As Sonia reads, her voice gets stronger. And when she gets to that line, Jesus wept, the shortest verse in the whole Bible, it just lands with this incredible weight. It's a moment of pure divine empathy that connects their two completely broken souls, the murderer and the prostitute, in their shared pain.
And in that moment, Sonia looks at Raskolnikov and she sees Lazarus. She sees a man who is dead on the inside, and she is just filled with this incredible triumphant hope that he too can be brought back to life, that the miracle can happen all over again, right now, for him.
And that connection with Sonia, that's the real turning point. It's through her unwavering faith and love that Raskolnikov is finally forced to look at his extraordinary idea and see it for what it really was.
So here it is, the final, crushing moment of self-awareness. He realizes he wasn't a Napoleon. He wasn't some great man destined to change the world. He was, in his own words, just a louse. He couldn't even handle the first step, and in trying, he proved he was the opposite of extraordinary. All that intellectual pride that led him to murder is just shattered by this deep, painful self-loathing.
Raskolnikov does eventually confess, and he gets sentenced to 8 years of hard labor in Siberia. But as the novel ends, with Sonia right there by his side, Dostoevsky makes it crystal clear that the legal sentence is almost beside the point. The real punishment was the psychological hell he created for himself. And his true journey, the long road from that punishment toward redemption, is really only just beginning.